Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of This Woman Can. I am your host, Janice Sutherland, and my guest this week is Dr. Ann Hernandez. And she was born and raised in the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and she has many years of experience as a scholar and practitioner at various academic levels in the Caribbean and the United States. She's an educational psychologist, professor of leadership, and an author, with her area of expertise in the leadership development of Black women and the path to living a meaningful life. Particularly interested in the role of mentorship and sponsorship in the leadership identity development of women. She's published and done a lot of work in this area. And as I said, she has been a full-time professor for most of her professional life, but she's pivoting to becoming an entrepreneur focused on the leadership development of women by targeting three areas of growth: relationship with self, others, and one's God. The first building block in this pursuit is a book that she's recently published, Waiting by the Brook, 7 Steps to Deeper Intimacy with God. And it's that pivot journey that brings her to the podcast today. So, Dr. Ann, welcome to This Woman Can.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I want to meet me.
You know, it's always the way. It's not till sometimes we hear it out of somebody's mouth, the things we've done or what we've achieved, that we realized how far we've come. So it's always a great way to introduce people and give them an insight into a little bit more appreciation to who they are. Give them the flowers, as they say.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the affirmation, because I do know as women, we tend to minimize the positive things about ourselves and maximize the negatives. And that's one of the things I am learning for myself at this stage of the journey.
Excellent. So, you've had a very varied career, or a very esteemed career, and you're considering a change or a reinvention or a pivot, whatever you wish to call it. What has prompted that change, that pivot?
Well, there are a number of things. I do believe that at different seasons of our life, we are called to be different things. Yeah. And I think as we get in touch with our authentic selves, we learn to listen to those promptings that it's time to change, it's time to move on. And I have felt that prompting for some time in different circumstances, and in a lot of cases, things that were outside of my control. Doors were not opening for me, but I knew that I was being called to do something more, something different at this point in my life. The other thing is, I think, especially when you reach a certain age, you realize that certain paradigms that were handed down to you, perhaps by parents, though well-intentioned, and though they served you well in the first stage of your journey, you need to abandon them and adopt new paradigms for the times. Yeah. And I would say one of those things was, I remember my dad telling me from very early in life, because this was the path he had taken, that I should get a government job. No, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Look, we're all familiar with government jobs.
Get a government job and you'll be set for life. And I really took that to heart. And for most of my life, I was working for others, and I became married. And my husband, he also followed that same paradigm passed on to him by his father. But then about in 2008, he decided to leave his job for a number of reasons. And we both began to think about becoming owners. How could we own our content and the contributions we were making? And more importantly, what was the legacy I wanted to pass on to my daughters? Did I want to pass on the same paradigm that had been passed on to me? It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. Yeah. And so I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I want them to have that mindset. And perhaps 20 years from now, they may need to abandon that, but this is where I am in my journey, and this is the legacy that I can pass on to them.
Fabulous. No, I love that. There's so much you said there. And I love the thing about you said about the paradigms. And it's so true that it's either societal or family will give us all these things and things we should do and what looks good and what, you know, what good looks like and and how we deem success. And I love the fact you talk about that. So Kathy, what have you found? Now you're making this pivot, you're making this change, and you kind of hinted at a different season of life, being a different season of life. But what do you think is unique about making that change at this stage in your life?
I think, well, at a certain point, certainly as you get older, developmentally, you realize you just don't have that many more years ahead of you if God spares life, right? If not now, when? And like I said, there are certain skill sets that I have developed over the years that I can look back on now and say, well, how can I maximize that? How can I take that up to the next level? And at a very hard level, to me, based on what you've read and a lot of things that I have accomplished in life, it seems as though I have it going on. Right? I mean, I'm a tenured professor. I am a leadership co-chair of my department, but at the heart level, what are you being called to do at this stage of the journey? And sometimes the metrics to assess that success is not these things.
Yes.
It's something that you know. And there are a number of authors who have addressed this. For instance, I'm thinking about David Brooks. He called it the second mountain. In the first phase of life, we want to accomplish, we want to prove that we can accomplish. And we get to that mountain. But in the second mountain of life, we begin to think about being true to that authentic self and how we can answer a higher moral calling. And when I say moral, I'm not talking about God so much. I'm talking about being the person on the inside that you want to be on the outside. That authentic calling. And I've always loved writing. I've always loved teaching. I never thought I could make money and live off of it. And the pragmatics of also growing up from what people would consider at-risk background. I had so much to prove that I could do it. I could write Ph.D. after my name, but after that, what? And I find myself, although I have kept with writing in my field, it's not really been the kind of writing that has called to my heart.
Right.
It's more of a creative, personal kind of autobiographic that really connects and resonates with people from a very human level. My writing that you read in my journals, I don't think anybody really enjoys reading them. It's the thing you do. But this speaks to me, and this is definitely where I know I need to be at this point in my journey. And I'm sure if you're listening, you know what I'm talking about, whatever that thing is for you, whatever it is.
And that's so beautifully put, because one of the things I talk to a lot of women about and work with them now is finding a career that's more aligned to their values and their personal career priorities, because those are very different to, as you said, what we would have had in our first phase. Probably the same for you. You know, success for our parents was having that PhD, was having the house, was having the car, was having the good job, be that government or otherwise. That was deemed success. Yes. Whereas I think we get later down life, success for us is, am I happy doing this?
Yes.
Does it call to me? Is it my passion? Does it fulfill me? Is it aligned with the values I want now? I know my values when I was in my 20s are certainly different now I'm in my 50s. And good job too, probably. I'm not sure I'd still be alive if I was following those type of values.
Yes.
Excellent. So making this change, Kathy Ann, what do you think, if anything, do you fear most about making the change or changing careers?
There are a number of fears, I must admit. Firstly, well, for me personally, and I'm sure maybe some women can relate, at this stage of life, there are different demands on your time. There are aging parents.
Mm-hmm.
There are, in my case, young kids. And so some of those, that there's a certain amount of
Yeah.
time investments that's needed when you're starting a business. It's a lot. So navigating what is important and what is necessary to do. And those are two words that I have thought
Mm.
about and think about quite at length, because as important as what I'm trying to do is to me, I think what is necessary,
Mm.
what must be done at this phase, if I don't do it, I'm going to miss out, is that because I value it, is to be there in a very meaningful way for my
Right.
daughters.
Yeah.
And so there is always that tension. There's that tension. One of the other things, quite practically speaking, is technology. I'm not a digital native. There's just so much. I sit in these groups with 30-year-olds and 25-year-olds, and I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
It's humbling. It's a little unnerving, especially having been in leadership positions and often being the most knowledgeable person in the room about a
Mm.
topic, to now
Yes.
recognizing what I don't know. But I also think that's a good thing, because I think once you recognize that, that's the space where you can begin to learn and grow.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're going for it, you're going to make that change. But what do you think if you didn't go for it, if you didn't make that change, you didn't take that leap or just trusted yourself, what regrets do you think you would have?
I think so. One of the most influential books that I have read that really has sort of become a mantra and has helped me think about, what do I want to do with this one precious life that I've been given? That's it. That's it.
Mm.
And so I want to, it's by Henry David Thoreau. It's called Walden. He said, I want to live deliberately, to suck the
Nice.
marrow out of life,
Yeah.
so that when it comes time to die, I will not find that I have not lived.
Mm.
And interestingly, when you look at some of the research I've done on the deathbed literature, when people come to die, the things that they talk about is not the articles or the accolades or what they have achieved.
Mm.
Often it comes back to some fundamental things: relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships. And I think to write our story and to write it well, the first relationship we have to attend to is our relationships with ourselves.
Yes.
Our authentic selves, that we're not kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not pretending. We are being true to that calling. And I think to live well is to work well.
Mm.
And so if I were to sum it up, I would say I just want to live well and to be true to the values that I hold to be dear, which is a relationship to myself, to my others in my life, and to my God. And that necessitates doing the hard thing.
Yeah.
And pursuing this work that calls to me.
Lovely. And you talked mention a few times about your authentic self. And, it's sometimes, dare I say it, a played out phrase, because you hear it a lot, but people don't actually really know, what does my authentic self, what does it mean? So in your words, how would you explain that for you?
Yes, so that's a great question. And it's very, actually, I'm challenged to explain it well, but I will try. So one of the things that I am mindful of is to really spend a lot of time doing introspection.
Okay.
So I journal, I reflect on where I am, what my goals are. And so because I want to be in touch with the person that other people don't see.
Mm.
So everything that you have read about me, and this is something that happens a lot in public circles, where when we are introduced, the things that people say about us are almost I would say, synonymous with our inauthentic self.
Yeah.
They are the trappings, they are the outer layers.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a doctor, I am this, I am that. But my soul, I am also a little girl who was abandoned by her mother as a baby, right? I have lots of residuals about that. I am a person who questions herself about, am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? If I was rejected by my own mother. So apart from the outer layer, there's all this stuff that's going on inside that it's our task as individuals to deal with and to try to make sense of, and to get professional help, get all the help that you can need to really excavate that person from all the other outside trappings that we see, and we come to think, well, that's Kathy Ann.
And I love that. It's about, like you say, it's about being, sometimes the things we don't do, and I know this as being a coach, is that I always tell women, I don't have the answers, but I do have the questions. And it's how you respond to those questions that really gives you the insight into yourself, because we all know it.
Yes.
But it's like you say, it's just taking that time to have a little introspection, to really sit down and be honest with ourselves, because that can be the hardest thing to do.
Honest, yes, honest with ourselves. And sometimes also it involves getting feedback from those who are close to us in our circle of trust.
Yeah.
Because we often don't see ourselves the way we actually present. But at the same time, taking that information and filtering it through and deciding what is useful and what is not.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work, I think, that and it's good work.
Yeah.
It's good work, because you come to a certain place where you can face yourself with those imperfections and be grateful for who you are and who you're continually striving to become.
Yeah, definitely. And I tell people, own who you are, warts and all, everything, because that's what makes you unique. So own all of it, because without that, you wouldn't be you.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. So you're on this transition, you're going through everything and stuff like that. But what do you think? What's one thing do you think could make or would have made your journey easier?
I think, given my introspective nature, and also I am a bit of a perfectionist. I think a lot of women, we struggle with that. Just wanting everything to be lined up and that I know exactly what I'm doing. And I just realized as I began this journey that you just have to take the first step and then take the second step, and you learn as you grow. So I perhaps wish I had started earlier to take those steps, because now I'm still taking little steps. But in a way, I also believe that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, when the time is right, things work out. I think one other thing I am learning is to ask for help, to seek help. You can't do it all.
Yes.
Again, the perfectionist. I would take my husband's advice long ago to get a cleaning service to help, and not pretend that I could clean the bathroom and do everything and whip out apple pie and write a book. And it's such a a self-defeating myth, because it makes other women feel so incompetent, as if they're not accomplished when they see from the outside that you appear to be doing it all, when there's always a cost.
Yeah,
There's
definitely. And sorry, carry on. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, as you said that, there was also one of the, we were talking about paradigms early. It was one of the things my mother used to tell me. And I know I was guilty of it, even when I was a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, and I was still cleaning my own home, because my mother had told me nobody should see your, wash your private garments, or should be in your home that you didn't know, so I still did all the things and wondered why I was being burnt out, at a real rate. So that just flashed in my mind just then. Excellent.
And I also think that as I grow in my business, because really I'm just at the beginning stages, but for other women listening, if you can afford it, spend the money and get somebody to help you do some things. One of my friends, her name Dr. Michelle Knight, she talks about your zone of excellence versus your zone of genius. I think especially for high achieving women, we are excellent in many things.
Yes.
And so we want to do it all. But that's not necessarily our zone of genius. Our zone of genius is that thing that we were born to do. And so we have to be brave enough and courageous enough and smart enough to pass on those things that we're excellent at and give it to somebody else. And they may not do it at an excellent way as we would, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think the hard thing there, and I have this constant battle with my husband, is that I will complain that he doesn't cook enough, but when he cooks it's not good enough. So I'm going to take that as a little lesson, little reminder to myself that you asked for the help, but you can't necessarily dictate the level of help per se.
And also it's also freeing you up, giving you valuable time to chat with me.
And exactly, what more could I want? So I mean I'm going to probe a little bit more on that, Kathy Ann. Ask, those 3 little letters, and it's always the little words that cause us problems. No, ask. Why do you think we struggle so much to ask for the support we need or ask the help we need?
Well, I can speak from my point of view in terms of, I've alluded to some of the reasons, knowing that because we can do things really well. We've trained ourselves to do it well. So we want it at a certain standard. And part of learning to delegate and lead is I would say to just lower your standard a bit. If it's acceptable and it's workable, it's fine. Move along. I say perfection is for losers, and I remind myself of that, because by the time I'm trying to perfect something, somebody's already out there launching their book and they're moving ahead. So perfection is for losers. And the other thing, I think for small businesses starting out, usually you really just don't have the resources. So in my case, right now I'm spending a lot of money in the initial setup, and the money isn't coming in. And so you really, for me, you don't know exactly how lucrative or how successful this is going to be. So you want to have some kind of budgetary guidelines in terms of how much you are going to spend until you see a return. Especially if you have a husband who's asking, is this a hobby or is it a business?
Oh, don't.
And so in terms of asking, I think especially at this stage of the game, asking also involves remuneration or compensation sometimes, and we don't have it. But also, thirdly, I think what you alluded to, that as women, we have just been trained to have this kind of, I can do it, I can take care of everybody else, and I don't need somebody to take care of me. And that is a mindset that we really need to experience a shift with if we're going to achieve success.
Definitely. And I agree with you there. And I have a thing where I call the MacGyver mindset. And I don't mean the newfangled MacGyver. I mean the old-fashioned MacGyver program. Those of us who are old enough to remember it. And the MacGyver. And have you ever watched MacGyver?
I have, a long time ago.
So for my MacGyver mindset always is, if I see a problem and it just needs to fix, I need to focus on the outcome and the solution, not how pretty it was to get there. So it can look as ugly as anything, the solution, whatever. I've got contraptions in my garden, or it's a workaround, but my goal always is to say, does it get the job done? And if the answer is yes, then that's been achieved.
I like
And
it.
that's where I focus it. So I have this MacGyver mindset, and even in business I did it, because you had to work very quickly. You couldn't wait for the perfect part or the best solution. What were you trying to achieve, and did you
Yes.
achieve it?
Mhm.
And that's where I place my focus.
I like it. I am taking that. I am adding that to my perfectionism is for losers.
Yeah, the MacGyver mindset. It's done me proud. It's done me proud over the years, and definitely more so as I've gone on the entrepreneurial journey myself, because I no longer have a huge corporation behind me to make things happen. It's down to me now most of the time.
Yes.
It's down to me most of the time. So I have to give up those perfectionist tendencies. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, for me was that I was still trying to measure my performance as if I was still in the corporate world, but I don't have all the corporate trappings to help me get the performance I'm looking for. So
when you say that, how so? How were you measuring your performance by the standards of the corporate
Well, I
world?
think I'll be looking for the same results, the same speed of results, maybe the same level of results and stuff like that. But to get those results you did in the corporate world, you had a whole team behind you. You had a whole organization. You had, I don't say bottomless pit, but you had a much bigger budget than I allowed myself. It wasn't my money back then. It's my money now. So I had to definitely learn patience. I had to learn how to be patient myself and not be so hard on myself. So that's where the MacGyver mindset tends to come in a lot more, because you were just trying to get the job done. What is the result you're trying to achieve? It's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. It has to get the job done.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So I learned to slow it down a little bit and not have such high expectations of myself, because you're at the top of your game in the corporate world. You're in front of the board and you're giving all these fantastic figures. How come I can't replicate that kind of performance in my own business?
Wow.
Well, the fact is, you don't have everything you have. You don't have the whole support network you had before.
Right.
It's a different business. You're learning something new. It's you. It's me, myself, and I now.
Pretty much.
Definitely. So this is probably a great question then. So, because I know what I've had to learn. If you had to start over from scratch, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently, Kathy Ann?
I think I alluded to it earlier. I would have not spent so much time thinking and planning and doing courses, and I would learn as I go. And it's interesting to me, I teach my students this, and when it comes to myself, I don't practice, that the way to do social science research is to really get involved in it. So from day one, I embed them in planning a research project and so on. And it's the same thing with business, because when we are put into a situation where we don't know what to do, then we are stretched and we begin forming what psychologists call schemas in our mind about how to make this work. You're talking about the MacGyver mindset. And once you form that schema in your mind, whether it is building a website or doing a podcast or what have you, or how to actually write your book, in spite of everything everybody has taught you, once you create that schema in your mind, it is yours. It becomes part of your content, of your intellectual property, because you know in a way that somebody cannot teach you. And so I really wish I had started incrementally and just learned as I went along. And also, as I said before, be brave enough and courageous enough to recognize that for the things that there's some things that I can ask people to do for me, or I can hire somebody to do while I'm trying to really follow my calling. So those are some of the things that I would probably say I regret.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that with us. So let's go on something a bit happier. So Kathy Ann, share with us a success quote or a mantra or something you use, an affirmation that you use and why it's meaningful to you.
I I can't think of one that comes to mind readily, but as I mentioned earlier, this quote by Henry David Thoreau, about living deliberately and
Mm.
really learning to suck the marrow out of life. I really, that speaks to me. It's interesting. I'm from Trinidad, and in Caribbean culture, in Trinidad culture, I should say, people usually just really suck the marrow out of their bones.
Yes, I think it's Caribbean people in general, because you don't want to see me at dinner time.
So that imagery has really been meaningful to
Yeah.
me. That, and to anybody listening, if this is your life,
Yes.
regardless of what your parents might have instilled in you, you know, are you going to go for this thing that calls to your heart?
Yes.
And so that, you would have laid it all out. That's my motivation, that I would give everything to living that full intentional life, so that I wouldn't have anything to regret when it comes time to die. I would, I did it. I tried, I gave it my all. That really spurs me on.
Fabulous.
It really does.
Fabulous. I love that. I love that. So in a similar vein, if you could choose your own mentor, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Yes, there's so many to choose from. I would say, and I know she is a bit of, some people really, really love her and some people really, really hate her, but I really admire Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
She has done such a tremendous job for being an influence for good in the world. And also, especially at this point in her career, moving out of broadcasting television, setting up her own network.
Yes.
I am impressed by how she's able to pivot, to take on new technology, to do new things. I know she recently launched a membership plan to invite women to, another way to get her magazines into their hands and to create this community. And when you see stories like that, it inspires us, that it's not too late. That's another quote I like. It's not too late and you're not too old.
Absolutely.
that you can do. And also, given her early beginnings and the challenges she faced, it really resonates with me that she was able to rewrite her story according to a plot that she created and that she's still writing.
Excellent.
And so I would love a moment on her couch with you.
I think there's a queue ahead of you, though.
I'll bring you listening to this. It's funny,
So we're coming down to our last couple of questions, Kathy Ann. So we'll get you out of the hot seat. What are 3 things you've learned about yourself during your career?
Yes. So one of the things I've learned is that the dreams that I had for myself were too small. And it's also an advice that I would give to anyone listening. Developmentally, we end up being products of the ecological spaces that we are born into, the context in which we are raised. And so we, through almost no fault of our own, we come with these limits on ourselves. And so one of the things I learned about myself is that my dreams were too small. And if I could go back, I would whisper in my ear, dream big.
Yes.
And then dream bigger and dream bigger. Because I have come to believe and accept that if you're passionate about it enough and you're willing to do the work, you can make it happen.
Excellent.
So that's one of the things that I've learned, that I'm still learning about myself. Keep dreaming and have bigger dreams. And I've learned that I can do more than I thought. And this is to all women out there. We often like I said, especially growing up in Caribbean culture, the mindset was that you should not blow your own horn. You should
Yes.
not speak about your accomplishments. Let
Yeah.
other people
Yeah.
speak about that for you.
Yeah.
And I do value the importance of humility, and I don't wear my accomplishments as a badge, but I have recognized that, especially in American culture, you need to be able to articulate what you're good at and what you're capable of doing. You can't be a shrinking violet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I would say you have to be prepared to take some of the repercussions that go with that. Some people will dislike you for it or think that you are to this or to that.
Yeah.
But it's a skill set that you have to develop to survive and thrive in this context. And it's something I'm constantly working at.
And is there a third one? You gave me two. Can we get two? Is there a third one?
Third one, I probably can't.
No worries. And I like what you said about that, because I am probably the opposite of that, where I refuse to be humble. But I think that's because when I look at it and do my introspection, that's because I was the eldest of six and I'm a big family. So if I had to speak up, if I wanted something, I wanted to be heard. And secondly, a lot of my career was spent in the sales environment. So, you were measured by your sales success on a daily, weekly basis. And they always used to have a phrase that you were only as good as your last sale.
Right.
Yeah. So that was always in my head. So, and the accolades always went to the person who did the best, who could talk the most about what they've done and obviously demonstrate it as well. So I kind of come from that background where that's still a big driver for me.
Did you, I didn't get your background, Janice. Did you grow up in the Caribbean?
No, I grew up in the UK. I grew up in the UK. I live in the Caribbean. I've lived out here for the past 10 years, but Caribbean parentage, first generation immigrant. So again, the success, one of the things I talk about, especially for Black women, is that often your parents' success, the measure of your parents' success is how successful their children are.
Right.
In a lot of families, and that for us as women, especially as Black women, our parents will measure their success on how much they pour into us and what we bring back for their bragging rights.
Exactly.
It's not about us. It's not about us. It's all about how they measure their success, which can be a good or a bad thing. But I think when it comes to looking at this thing I've been working on, when it comes to looking at career pivoting for women or transitioning for women, that's the first thing we often deal with, the fact that, we don't see it as being successful. How can we be successful if we're not doing what our parents deemed was success? Right. So it's an interesting paradigm or interesting situation to be in. But that was where that for me was where I grew up in the UK. And also, I think in growing up in the UK as well, and we're digressing a little bit on the podcast, is that, I was always raised to be 10 times better than my white counterpart.
Same thing here.
That was inbred. That was, you heard that daily. Don't make them get better than you. Don't make them pass you. Don't make them tell you can't do something, So it was that. So I think that has always been there. It's always been a bit of an internal driver for me, that quest to be the best. Difficult to get by, and you can see my challenge of having to learn patience with myself.
Janice, some things you said actually reminded me of two things. So one, when I said 3 things I learned about myself, about leadership, the third one came back to me, and then something else about the pivot. So the third thing I learned about myself, thinking about what you said, is that my accomplishments, they are so much more than for me. And I think in the early phase, really, it's about proving to yourself and to myself that this girl who was abandoned by a mother, she can do this, she can accomplish, right?
Yes.
But then I recognize, I'm not sure exactly when the turn came, but you begin to realize that this is so much bigger than you. It's not about you at all. There's a responsibility that comes, and it's heavy. It's a heavy weight, right? A responsibility, which is, I think, probably what's propelling you to do this podcast and so on. A responsibility to give back to those who have invested in you. And so whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, that's there and that drives you. It drives me, because I remember my father driving his taxi up and down the road, taking those crumpled dollar bills so he could invest in my education.
Yeah.
And so I have a responsibility with the robe and everything to give back and to do and to help others along the way. And that's one of the things I have learned that I didn't really think about.
Yeah.
It was about accomplishing.
Yes.
It was about doing, but it's a very big part of my life now. And then the other thing was when you mentioned, what do I regret? Or what am I fearful of?
Yes.
And you talked about your parents and success being if you're doing what your parents had in mind for you. I think one of the things that I've been hesitant to acknowledge to myself, but again, this is getting to know yourself, is just how much our titles mean to us.
Oh my goodness.
And to the people around us.
Yes.
So if I'm not Dr. Kathy Ann Hernandez, Professor of Organizational Leadership at Eastern University, who am I?
Yeah.
And there is an added burden that comes from being a Black immigrant woman, because sometimes those titles are part of what allows us to get through doors.
Yeah.
And so I am still in the space of thinking about what that means for me and how I'm going to navigate that. But what I'd like to suggest to women who are looking on is, I always thought, I just had the mindset that I had to give it all up. But I think a smarter way and a more strategic way is to use this platform to move from A to B. You don't have to burn your bridges behind you. And just look at some like J.K. Rowling. She wrote the Harry Potter book when she was a waitress. Then you have the Kite Runner, the author of the Kite Runner. He wrote his great book when he was practicing medicine. And so you can be strategic in planning out how you want to make that transition.
And I know we're going to digress a little bit. This is great conversation, by the way. But when you talk about that, I had I suppose I had that whole, the title thing and things like that. Who am I? It was a very poignant. As I said, I became the first CEO to head up a telecoms industry here in Antigua. So with that title, as you know, on a small island, Caribbean island, everybody wants to know who you are because you have this title and this perceived prestige.
Yes.
And when I decided that this, I don't want to do this anymore, this is my huge pivot now. I'd already moved countries, but this seemed like an even bigger pivot, leaving my job at the height of my career. I probably could have heard crickets after I'd left, because nobody wants to know you anymore because you didn't have anything. Or there's nothing they perceive that of value you could give them anymore, because you didn't have access to credit, to free phones, or to the network. You couldn't sort out their problems because not for a longer time after that. But there was a. It's not sometimes you that's the label or the title. It's what it brings.
Absolutely.
And once I was comfortable thinking, I know you only wanted me for that, and I am not that. It was a relief not to have to be in that title anymore because of what people demanded of me. And secondly, I was totally cognizant that you only wanted to know me because of that.
Yes.
And that's with being honest, as you said, introspection, not getting caught up in the title, because it's not you they want. It's the title. Because the next person to step in that title, they would say, "Oh, who? Janice who?" They've gone, they've moved on. So it it was a very poignant situation, very poignant position for me to be in, to realize, okay, I accept that. You know, it could have gone a different way. I could have totally lost who I was, but I knew who I was. Right. And that title didn't define who I was.
And so Janice, what you say resonates with me so much, because I feel as though I am so above titles and all of that. I'm like, well, whatever. But I think we need to recognize, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
In that is a kind of capital. If you want to start a business, having a platform is a source of capital.
Yeah.
And my husband, he's a CPA, so he thinks in this corporate way, and he said it's a platform. Yeah. So if you're thinking about doing a pivot, whoever you are, how can you, while you're still over here, use that platform,
absolutely,
use those networks, use those connections to move you over here? Don't just, I'm out.
Yeah.
Because you have done a lot of work to create this, and this is a value.
Yeah.
So don't totally discount it as you're ready to make your pivot.
Yeah. Definitely. And networking. And I just had a conversation earlier today, and someone said the one thing they weren't very good at doing was honing their network. And and I think the good thing about that is that you network with people who actually want to know who you are, not the position, the title. And there are people out there, but you just have to put a little bit of effort into it to identify who those are. You know, Absolutely. So yes.
Absolutely.
So great conversation, Kathy Ann. My last question for you now. My last question, because we could be here for hours. We could be here for hours. What does success feel like to you?
Yeah. Wow, that's such a very profound question. As I have said repeatedly, I think at different stages of our life journey, we're called to be different things.
Yes.
So part of being successful is being attuned to who you are and what you're being called to do at this particular time, and living in congruence with that. So for me, success is to more fully accept that calling at different seasons in my life, and to embrace it with all my fears and all my uncertainties, with high intention and great effort. I really believe, you hear about people who made it. My experience has been that you've got to put in the work.
Yes.
You've got to put in the work. So high intention and great effort to really maximize the gifts and the opportunities that I have been given to benefit others, to be true to myself, to benefit others. So that when it come time to die, I would not find that I've spent my time doing things that weren't really that important after all. Yeah.
Excellent. So that was my official last question. But if people want to get hold of you, connect with you, or know more about your book, Kathy Ann, how can they do that?
Oh, sure. So part of this pivot is I founded a lifestyle brand called Value What Matters. And I have a website. I'm on Facebook, on Instagram. You can find me at Dr. H Value What Matters. And my book is available on Amazon. I'm also in the process of planning a spiritual retreat, which I will have more details on my website, valuewhatmatters.com, and my Facebook page. And that's going to be the end of October.
Excellent.
And I would love for you to, whoever you're listening, to visit and attending. Yes.
Fabulous. I'll be sure to put all the links in the show notes so everybody has access to that. So Dr. Kathy Ann Hernandez, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been a fabulous conversation.
It has. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Thank you.